everybody, it's Romania Black, and we're on episode 12, technically episode 11, of Heaven Official's Blessing. And how is this the second to last episode of season 1? I say second to last episode. There's the OVA that we're going to watch next week, and I never call OVAs episodes. I've had a couple people in the comments be like, oh, don't forget about the OVA episode. I always just call them OVAs because they're not technically an episode, but they kind of are. So yeah, we do have that next week, and then we'll start in on the novel, and going through it week to week, which I'm really super excited by because I have a feeling, just like with Moda Azushi, the donghua is great, but I feel like once I get into the novel, I'm going to love it even more, and the manhua as well. But I do have some comments before we start episode 12 and get into that. But I'm really, really excited. I'm recording it a little bit ahead of schedule just because I want to give myself plenty of time to kind of see how long it takes me to read that novel. So, so we'll see. We'll see. I'm still trying to debate on how to split it up. I think I might do the first 2 sets of chapters, which is like 50 pages worth for that first week's worth of novel, and just kind of do that, which won't give us a lot of weeks with the novel, and then we'll have to figure out what to do from there. But we'll see. I'll see how long that takes me. I'll see how long the first chunk takes me, and then we'll go from there. I'll probably have more information next week after I look over that first part of the novel. But let's go over some comments before we got a 30-minute episode. Man, the last several episodes have gone really, really short. So I'm like, okay, good. A 30-minute episode to round out the season before the OVA. We need it because we got lots of questions. And I just have this sinking feeling that, kind of like Moda Azushi, they're not going to give us all the answers. No. I'm just hoping that we at least find out, 1, who those 2 ladies are. I wonder who they are, what the deal with them is. 2, why Banyu, why she left that night that the gates opened. If it was her that opened the gates, if it was somebody else, what the reasoning was. I want to know that. 3, where is Zhao? Where is he? I've not forgotten about him. He's in the back of my mind, like pinned in my brain. Where is he? He supposedly was in the pit. Where did he go? What's going on? So I have questions with that, and I want answers. So those are the 3 things I want answers for. We know it's Hua Chong at this point. That mystery is kind of revealed. There's still lots of interesting things about Xie Lian's memory, which I'm assuming we're going to find out more in the novel, things like that. But those are the 3 main questions I have. Where's Zhao? Who are those 2 ladies? What's the deal with the Banyu's betrayal? She's like Xie Lian and Hua Chong's version of Ayan, right? It's kind of like, only she's older now and she's a ghost. It's like, what if Ayan died and became a ghost? MXTX is like, here are your answers. So I do have some questions before we start. I have noted back in episode 10 and 9, I was like, yeah, Xie Lian's pretty oblivious. And everybody was like, oh no, he knows it's Hua Song. And I'm like, no, I get that. I know that he knows it's Hua Song at this point. That Hua Chong at this point, San Long is Hua Chong. I know he knows that at this point. He just doesn't care. So he's not really investigating any further. He's like, well, I don't judge you, so whatever. What he's oblivious about, and I should have made myself clearer, is that romantically, Xie Lian is missing all the cues that Hua Chong is giving him. Hua Chong is dancing around, holding him bridal style, like he's like the cat that massacred a whole plague of mice, brought them to Xie Lian's feet and was like, look at my gift. And Xie Lian's like, why'd you do that? Like, he's that kind of oblivious. He's just, romantically, he doesn't get the cues. So that's what I mean by that. But I thought a lot of people were like, oh, he knows it's Hua Chong. I'm like, I know he knows. We all know he knows. He just doesn't care because Xie Lian is an amazing cinnamon bun, right? Anastasia notes that Half Moon Pass, the people there actually do speak another language. The Netflix translation doesn't reflect that so much, but if you actually listen, you'll note that it is kind of like a gibberish language that was made up. And so that makes Xie Lian knowing that language all the more obvious. And I thought that was pretty cool. Anime Annie, several of you, I took the comments from episodes 9 and 10, so some of these are going to be, I'm going to mention some people multiple times. But Anime Annie notes that Nan Fong was very badass in episode 9, but that was his powers limited. And I was like, oh yeah. So Fong and Yao, they've had their powers kind of limited and reduced because they're so far away from their temples. I'm like, if that's how badass he is without being at full power and they're a deputy god, okay. I'm like, oh, awesome. So he could have been much stronger. I'm like, that's pretty crazy. So thank you for pointing that out. That's something to kind of pin in my brain as we keep going forward. And that Xie Lian gets on, I like that Xie Lian gets on Shang and Banyu's level when he talks to them, because it's kind of establishing that he's not towering over them. He's on equal terms, which goes back to what Xie Lian said about the gods and people being equals. It kind of ties to his moral character, his personality. But it's also really interesting because we know that Xie Lian is a god and was a prince. So it's interesting that he gets on their level when those things seem like they would be above someone of a deity-like status like Xie Lian is supposed to be. So that's very, very interesting. And also, Anime Annie was like, it shows that he has experience with kids and smaller people. And I was like, oh, okay. And given that flashback we got in episode 11, it's like, oh yeah, he was with Banyu when she was a child, so he's used to being around kids. I'm like, interesting. Very interesting. And he also caught, if we assume the kid with the bandage is Hua Chong, caught him as a child. So curiouser and curiouser, right? Four Sunsets noted that the merchants who got into the palace, actually Four Sunsets, Kix K, Sarah Linda, the entire community noted that the merchants who got into the palace probably snuck away from Yao when he wasn't looking, when they said they had to go to the bathroom. And I was like, oh, that makes more sense. So Yao, who wasn't really taking his job, I guess, too seriously, let him kind of sneak off and then was like, damn it, now I have to go find you. Very good. I'm glad you guys all pointed that out for me. Thank you. And also, Kix K and Sarah Linda, they noted that he could have escaped this way under their noses. Ivan as Ida noted that Hua Chong's clothing is based on the Miao people, which include 4 groups with different language and cultures making it up, and that they're scattered throughout South China and Southeast Asia in countries like Vietnam, Laos, and Thailand. So I like that. I like that there's like a cultural significance and inspiration to Hua Chong's clothing. It's beautiful. I love his outfit. And then I like of course, the butterflies ordaining it. Very nice. So thank you. SQQLB314 noted that Kamo told the story of Banyu. So we're hearing this story from his perspective. And it's like, yes, MXTX loves to play the game of the one side of stories. We've heard the stories from one side, but as Lan Wangji would say in Modao Zushi, we haven't heard the entire picture, so we don't know the full story and the full context. So I'm like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We need to know the other side. And in the last episode, we slowly started to get it, right? But Banyu's pretty shy, so she couldn't explain it all the way through. But we're getting there. Kix K noted that so I thought that was pretty interesting. Kix K noted that the animation in episode 10, there was a sequence cut out of Netflix because it was accused of plagiarism, and it was like an action sequence between Kamo and Hua Chong, and it was Hua Chong kind of charging at Kamo and attacking him, and the animation was supposedly plagiarized from Attack on Titan Season 3 in a battle with the character Levi and another character, and I was like, oh! And so in the Discord, Kix K sent like a side-by-side comparison. Yeah, it's pretty damning. It's pretty on the nose. I was like, yeah. Sometimes I'm like, oh, sometimes I think people get a little bit too crazy with the whole like plagiarism versus inspiration, but in that case, it was pretty much shot for shot about the same. But it's kind of ironic because in the Japanese dub of Heaven Official's Blessing, the voice actor for Xie Lian is the same voice actor for Levi, who the clip was plagiarized from. So it's a funny little like connection there between all of them. So that was interesting. And apparently the Donghua's gotten somewhat of a bad rep because of that. I'm like, that is kind of bad, but at the same time, it's kind of funny. So interesting. Anime Annie noted that Xie Lian's animal mascot is not a rabbit. I talked about in episode 10 that he kind of looked like a rabbit jumping into the sinner's pit, but that his animal mascot is a weasel. And I was like, a weasel? Xie Lian, our cinnamon bun, is represented by a weasel. And at first, you have the negative connotation of it's a weasel. It's kind of like sly and slimy. But I would argue that a weasel's kind of perfect because if you've ever seen a weasel or a ferret or you've owned one, they can squeeze through any little nook and cranny. Their body can like contort and conform and like if it's like the diameter of a dime, they can squeeze through. So they're very adaptable and flexible, and that kind of seems like it fits Xie Lian's personality, that he's more adaptable depending on whatever situation he is in. And we know from episode 1 that he's been 3 different gods, 3 different iterations. One was apparently one that battled, one was the plague god, and one is the scrap collector god. So he's been able to adapt to different lives. So I'm like, that kind of fits a weasel. Fits it. I thought that was pretty cool. And then Four Sunsets finally noted that the veil of Chinese brides is usually opaque. So in episode 1, all Xie Lian could see was Hua Chong's hand leading him out of the carriage. And I'm like, okay. So I know there's been a lot of people being like, look at the hands. I'm like, I'm going to figure it out. It's going to come out. But I'm honestly excited about the novel in the next couple of weeks because I know the novel is from Xie Lian's perspective. And I've been waiting to see, because in the donghua, we don't really get to know what's inside of his head. We see him do glances. We see him like run his hand across the wall. We see him make glances towards San Long, but we don't really know what he's thinking. So it's going to be really cool to see and hear from Xie Lian's perspective what's going on. And he's talked about having spotty memory. You know, we joke in Modao Zushi that Wuxian has spotty memory, but I guess for Xie Lian, it's intentional and an actual thing. So I'm like, cool, great. Glad that that's been established. So yeah, I'm pretty excited to get into this episode and be 30 minutes. I'm really sad that we're already to the end of season 1. I feel like we just started. So that sucks. But we do have the OVA next week. And then I'll talk at the end about what we're doing with the OVA. I'm going to do a couple extra things with it. So that should be for a longer reaction. So we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. But yeah, I'm ready to dive in and hopefully get some answers. Like, how are you going to end this and brace us for season 2, huh? But we won't waste any more time, right? We're going to dive into Heaven Official's Blessing, episode 12, technically episode 11, and we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. That was a crazy place to end this season. I know we still have the OVA, so I'm like, okay, well, there's still technically one more episode, but it's an OVA, and usually OVAs are like the side story. They're not really connected to the plot. So I'm like, okay, is the OVA going to be about just San Long and Xie Lian having dinner together? Is that going to be the OVA, and that's where it ends going into season 2? It was a weird place to leave off at, right? But then again, Modao Zushi season 1, from what I remember, had a very definitive like end point. But I think I remember Modao Zushi season 2 ending like kind of on a weird note like that. But this did not feel like a season finale at all. It felt like just like, okay, well, we've wrapped up that thing, so I guess we'll have dinner, and that's where it ended. How weird. I'm really curious about the OVA now. I'm really curious to know what the heck they're going to do in that. So as far as before we get into this episode, what my plans were for the OVA for next week is to watch the OVA, and then Anime Annie has compiled together the advertisements that went with Heaven Official's Blessing season 1, and I was going to react to those after watching the episode. Or maybe before. I might actually do the advertisements before the OVA because that seems better. And then I thought about reacting to the English lyrics for the subtitles for the OP and the 2 EDs. I thought about doing that too, but that will probably be at the end of the reaction after I've got done talking about everything. So what I'll probably do next week is we'll watch the advertisements, and then we'll watch the OVA, and then we'll do a discussion of the OVA, and then we'll round out the episode with me looking at the 3 songs, and then we'll kind of round that out before starting the novel and the manhwa. I think that's the order that I'll do it in. That seems like it'll work out the best. But because I can just put my headphones on for the song reactions, even though there won't be sound, I can do the song reactions that way, and that will be fine. But yeah, we got answers, but again, more questions. So many questions. And here's the thing. I'm going to be reading the novel. So as I'm getting into discussion, please, mental note, I'm going to get into the novel. So I don't want to know novel details, stuff that I want to be able to read the novel and be surprised. So there's probably going to be a lot of questions that I ask in this discussion that you're going to be like, the novel's going to tell you the answer. And I'm going to be like, great, good, glad we got that sorted out. But man, what a crazy episode. And I feel like seeing this story from Xie Lian's perspective is going to be really good in the novel, because I want to know what he's thinking in a lot of these scenes. And because we don't really get this series, the way the donghua is structured, we don't really get it. It's not really from a first-person perspective. The donghua is not. It's really from like a third-person observer perspective. We're just watching these characters and seeing the story happen or surrounding them. But because of that, we don't really get a lot of internal monologue. We get a little bit, but not a lot. Not like when you're reading a story and it's from first-person perspective. But man, I was like, okay, all right. And then people have asked me if I'm going to react to the season 2 trailer when I'm done with volume 1 of the novel. When I'm caught up with volume 1 of the novel, I'm going to react to the trailer because one, I have a feeling it's still going to be a little bit before we get into season 2 of the Donghua, and so I want to keep a little chunk of animated goodness as we get closer. But two, I want to read the novel, have full context of the novel, and then watch the preview, because I think it's going to hit a lot harder if I have the full context of the novel and then watch the preview. I think that'll hit a lot harder and be a lot better. So that's my thoughts anyway. We'll see if that actually holds true. But yeah, the whole thing with the pit, so Zhao. So old Pei Jr., huh? He's the one commanding the snakes. Interesting. And so, yeah, there's some things I want to keep track on here because characters in this series, they just up and vanish. They just up and decide to go. Like Yao leaving suddenly was like, I guess he decided to go back. I'm like, well, I'm used to Modao Zushi where like Wanji was like keeping tabs on everyone and was like, Wushin, where are you? And Wushin's like, Ling, where are you? And like in Modao Zushi, everybo's like keeping tabs on where everybody is. And here people just up and leave and they're like, oh, I guess they're a god. They can come and go whenever they please. I'm like, oh. I'm like, show. Okay, sure thing. And I don't know if some of this could be like a Donghua thing where the novel will explain it better. I'm assuming that's the case. But I like that, so I'm assuming, we're going to talk about here. I'm trying to find places to put all of this because there's a lot going on in this episode. But I'm going to put powers over here. So I want to make a note that Nongfeng and Old Yao over here, they both have like the fire powers, but it's also triggered by blood, or at least for Yao it is, which is interesting. So you got this whole blood triggering power, and so because he like cuts his thumb to use it, which is interesting. And so yeah, I like that he has the whole ring of fire, and of course I like that Yao is very much an overkill, right? Because Xie Lian's like, okay, good, you did it. And he just keeps like burning up the snakes. It's like Yao is like, he's like, just overkill. And he's like, you aren't controlling, why aren't the snakes attacking you? And I like that San Long, I like that he looks over at Ban Yu and is like, why aren't the snakes attacking you? This is your fault. And San Long enters the frame and he's like, actually, perhaps you aren't fortunate today because they're not attacking any of us but you. They didn't attack us either. And he's like, ugh. And yeah, I was like, is that so? It's so great. And I like Xie Lian's like, please, he doesn't mean it. It's fine. He's like, please calm down, Fu Yao. He's like, we should figure out what's the matter with the snakes first. And yeah, I was like, the matter, it's either the girl lied or your friends of yours set this up. And Xie Lian's like, I don't think they're the ones to blame. I love how Xie Lian is like, no, they're my friends, and my friends wouldn't hurt me. It's like, it's a moment that I want to be inside Xie Lian's head, because I want to see him be like, no, they're my friends, they won't hurt me. So Xie Lian, he trusts Ban Yu and San Long. Completely, right? We'll talk about that at the end of this episode. And then Ban Yu, we're going to put her over here. Her whole thing, Ban Yu. And I'm going to put old Peiju, put old Junior up here as well. Got him in all this. And then, yeah, we're going to talk about the Wind Master. So the Wind Master, we're going to put her up here. The Wind Master, the one that was generously giving out all the gold and riches. And the moment that Xie Lian brought up Half Moon Pass, the Wind Master was like, more money! So there's stuff going on there. We've got the other master that will be left, whose element shall be left unnamed for the moment, right? And then we have old San Long. San Long, I'm going to put him down here. San Long, a.k.a. Hua Chong. Yeah, we'll put them right there. So we got lots of characters, lots of work going on with these characters throughout this. But yeah, Xie Lian's like, and I like that Yao's like, Your Highness, come to your sisters. He's like, please, do you still remember your identity? And I like the Hua Chong's in the background like, you don't know our deity here. So I like that Yao is just frustrated by Xie Lian's trust in them. He's like, I don't know why you're trusting these guys. They don't seem like good news. Come to your senses. You're a deity. Like, what's going on? He's like, I think you're perfectly aware of your friend's identity. And it's like, ugh! And Xie Lian's like, well, you know, he's like, I know my identity better than anyone. And he's like, then how can you still stand by his side? He's like, you know he's a ghost. You know he's possibly Huachong. How can you stand by him? If you're a god, he's like, come on, like, what's the deal? And Xie Lian's like, because his side doesn't have any snakes. He's like, but because... And that gets Huachong to laugh. It's like, oh, in fact, yeah, I was like, he's like, what are you doing? But then it's like, as soon as he laughs, he does get serious. And I love that San Long immediately, like, senses danger, and he just stands around Xie Lian like, I'll protect you, bae. It's like, oh my god. But Yao is just so incredulous. He's like, what is going on? So interesting. And he pulled out the umbrella to defend against the snakes. I'm going to get a picture of that, of him with the umbrella protecting his man. Oh my god. I freaking love it. Like, it's so good. At this point, it's like, they won't dare come here. At this point, and he's like, San Long. And I like that when he has the umbrella over him, and you can see Xie Lian be like, San Long. And you just see his smile, and that's it. It's Mr. Smirk. It's like, uh-huh. And at this point, the moment he pulled out the red umbrella, it's like, are you even trying? And it's like, no. I think at this point, San Long's like, no, the cat is out of the bag. Yao knows that it's me. He knows that you know that it's me. He's like, you know, at this point, you can stand under my umbrella, Ella, against these snakes, and we're going to be fine. He's like, at this point, what's the point of me even trying to hide? And then he's like, don't worry. He won't die. I love that smirk. I love that smirk where he's just like, oh yeah, your friend Yao. And we see in the background, Yao is just like, Yao is defending himself against hundreds of snakes, looking like, that seems like needs to be a meme. I'm going to put it up here. That needs to be a meme where Yao's like fending off all these snakes. And meanwhile, Huachong has the umbrella and he's like, he'll be fine. He won't die. That's so freaking good. And Xie Lian's like, oh, I guess he'll be okay. If you say so, you know. And he's like, why can't you make more fire? Make more fire! I like that Xie Lian's like, just make more fire. Cut your hands some more. And he's like, I can't. He's like, I can't. The thing by your side is suppressing my powers. And okay, at this point, I like the, I love the grumpy cat face that Huachong has in that moment. Xie Lian looks serious. Xie Lian's like, what's blocking your powers? But I love the idea that Huachong's like, that's not me. Like, I love that he gets such the grumpy cat face. He's like, I'm not blocking anybody's powers. I could, but I'm not. I'm like, oh my gosh, I love that face. But Xie Lian's like, oh, he puts two and two together. And this makes much more sense about the communication array now. Something was blocking them from contacting the heavenly realms. So that was Pei Jr. blocked contact with the heavenly realms because he's trying to keep the moon, the Banyu, the half moon pass a secret. So he blocked their communication back in the cave so they couldn't contact anybody. And now he's blocking the spiritual powers that Yao has. Because if I'm thinking right, let me go back to my notes here. If I'm thinking right, Yao is attached, well, they're not attached to General Pei at all, right? Zhao is with Fengxin, right? I think so. And Muqing is the one that Nanfeng is with. Okay. But still, he's like, I know. And Xie Lian's like, that's why it's confusing. I love that in this moment we find out that, no, Xie Lian is onto Pei Jr. and figures it out. He figures it out in that moment. Is like, okay, it's not Huachong that's blocking the energy, it's someone else. So I like that he gets serious, like Banyu and Kimo are locked up. so it can't be them, and my spiritual powers ran out. So it seems that there's a sixth person in the pit. And yeah, of course, Yao is like, that's not true, not at all. And then he's like, what's wrong, Ban Yu? Did someone go over to you? And yeah, that's when she got killed. I love that he's instantly concerned about Ban Yu. Xie Lian's like, wait, are you okay? Is everything all right? And then, of course, Yao is still like, watch out for her tricks. He's like, no, we gotta save her. And then Hua Chong's like, it's okay. You come with me. We'll do this together. We'll run across the snake pit under my umbrella forever. It's fine. It's all great. And that shot of them, why is it so beautifully animated? Like, the animation in this episode was fine, but for some reason they threw in like an extra grand for the budget to get them like looking beautifully while running across the sinner's pit with the umbrella as a rain of snakes comes down upon them. That's a sentence I never thought I'd say. But then the sword comes out to attack him. Oh, that shot, there's like all the shots in this. For the record, I'm going to be taking so many screenshots throughout this, I'm sure, of Hua Chong with him. Let's be real. But yeah, the snake comes out. I love that shot of Hua Chong where he pulls Xie Lian back and is like, I'll protect you. Oh, it's so good. And his weapon comes out. And he's like, there is indeed a sixth person. He's like, how interesting. I love that he's like, here you go, babe. Here, you hold the umbrella. I'm going to go take care of this guy. It's all right. Like, he's like, wait for me. I'll deal with him. And Xie Lian's like, okay. And he just chucks off into the shadows, into the darkness, right? And I love the sword coming out and clashing. Oh, look at that. We see for an instant, we see our boy. We see Hua Chong, with the red eye, like just for a second as their blades connect. Ooh. Okay. Oh, I love it. I love that it's a tease. It's a damn tease. Such a tease. Okay. And Xie Lian's like, you guys okay over there? And Ryuji's trying to do something, and he's like, it's okay. He's like, I know. He's like, don't be afraid. Calm down. I love that he has to tell his bandage to calm down. And he's like, Ban Yu, are you okay? Can you talk? And maybe the person you hit is her. And he's like, no, she didn't do this. I like that he knows the difference. He's like, she's a tiny person, and her strength is not in force or weapons. He's like, that can't be it. He's like, it has to be someone else. And he's like, when did a person come down here? And it's like he's been there the whole time. Zhao's been there the whole time. Zhao, aka Ping Jr., Pei Jr., old Zhao, his identity. And it's actually Yao. He says traitors like her and Shanji. And it's like, our birds of a feather. Why do you trust her? And then Xie Lian's like, what did you just say? Say that again. He says, why do you trust her? He's like, no, back up before that. He said, you mentioned Shanji. I think it's interesting that I got the impression that he liked Ban Yu. I got the impression that Pei Jr. liked Ban Yu, that he really liked her. And then she died, and he got mad and was like, oh, like he couldn't save her, right? He was doing this. There's a lot of reasons why he was doing the whole massacre, but we'll talk about that. But I feel like one of the things was that he wanted to protect her, and then she died, and he was like, oh. And so I think it's a nice contrast to General Pei. And again, General Pei Ming. Again, I don't want to know any spoilers. Don't tell me how they're similar or dissimilar. Don't want to know that yet. I'll find it out. But from what we know right now, based on this episode, it seems like there's a contrast, right? Because Pei Jr. does not seem like a playboy at all. It seems like he really liked Ban Yu, and then she died, and he, unlike General Pei Ming, he stuck around. He stuck around to make sure that even though she was a wrath ghost, that the heaven officials didn't come down. He snuck around to make sure everything kept down low so that she wasn't discovered and exorcised or exiled or imprisoned or anything like that. he stuck around to make sure that didn't happen, which is in direct contrast to General Ming, who did not want to stay around Zhangji and didn't want to have anything to do with her. Now, of course, Zhangji was madly in love with him. From what we know, Ban Yu, I don't think, saw him in that way, but he liked her. So it's interesting. The contrast between the two characters is very interesting, especially because they're both connected characters. He's a descendant of General Ming, so it's interesting. I like it. And so he's like, I know who you are. You need to stop this. And then them both fighting. He's like, okay, you can cut out the snakes. I know it's you, Zhao. He's like, do you think I'm just bluffing, General Pei Jr.? And he's like, you're insane. That's not him. Yao. And then they keep sword fighting. He's like, I should have figured it out earlier. For the last 200 years, the Heaven Realm was oblivious to the chaos in the Half Moon Pass. Someone was trying to keep a lid on it. So yeah, so he has been keeping Half Moon Pass a secret for 200 years, which was around the time of his ascension. It all adds up, right? That all adds up. Yep. He was only in his 20s when he was promoted. He was difficult to deal with, just like his ancestors. And he had a massacre, which makes sense. Yeah, he was responsible for all of them dying. And they're like, where did he commit the massacre? Rumor has it that the Imperial Preceptor let the snakes sting people and fed them to ghost soldiers. But no, that wasn't it. It was him. He's had them stung. He had them stung. It's like, because then the Windmaster asks, well, why didn't you wipe them all out? Why didn't you just wipe out all the ghosts in the town? He's like, no, because that would have drawn too much attention and they would have gone down and seen Ban Yu. Instead, he killed the people and fed them to the soldiers so that it would appease them and things would just stay kind of status quo and nobody would investigate. And he's like, Kamo's afraid of snakes, so it wouldn't be him. So who was it? Right? Why did he do that? And he's like, well, the restless spirits held grudges because they were brutally massacred. General Pei did all this to cover up the truth. And he's like, no, that a god like him would have drawn attention by coming down here, and that's why he had the alias. What if it wasn't him himself? So I like that they go through this. And he's like, I used to live here for years and never encountered a scorpion-tailed snake. Yet the merchants got attacked in a random shelter. Yeah, that's a great point. Xie Lian's like, I've come here for years and years and nothing happened to me. Why to these random people? Because it was intentional. It was set up, right? How'd the merchants get here so fast without a guide? And yeah, so he met one of us 50 years ago to coax us into approaching him. But yeah, so he goes back to the face that was in the ground and realizes that maybe they were talking about Zhao for the last 50 or 60 years. But it could be both. You know, Zhao says, how do we not know it's not Hua Chong that's been coming here the last 50 or 60 years? It could be both. It could be both. We don't know. As long as we go this way. Yeah, at this point, it's like, I told you I would step forward should anything happen, but you still jump down, right? He's like, don't you want to justify your suspicious behavior, General Pei Jr.? Or should I call you Zhao? Yeah. And I like that at that moment, the power that had been suppressed is released and Yao is able to use his light again. And that's when we see him with Bon. Yeah. You say, oh, my powers are restored. And there's like all the dead bodies everywhere, you know, like you do. And then he looks over and he's like, oh, Your Highness, did it ever occur to you that the half-buried face might be referring to your friend in red? Oh, that shot of San Long. I want to get a picture of that one too. He has so many good... He has such great faces in this series. Yeah, man! San Long, not a scratch on him. Old Pei Jr. looking a bit worse for wear. I'm just saying. Curious. Interesting. So yeah, we all knew it's the hot ones, right? I'm glad you all didn't spoil me that it was General Pei Jr. I'm glad you didn't spoil me on that, because I remember back when we first saw Zhao, I'm like, he's suspicious, he's hot, and y'all were like, so, just so we know, as my dog's digging into the carpet, just so we know, whenever there's a hot character on screen, they're going to be instantly suspicious. Right? This series don't play. So, oh my gosh, interesting. And Kamo recognizes him. Kamo recognizes Pei. He says, Pei Zhu. Like, even in death, he knows, who are you? Aren't you supposed to be dead? And he's like, you didn't change at all after all these years. Yeah, and the way he said that, his voice was instantly different. It was a totally different tone immediately. I was like, oh crap, yeah. And so again, there, as several of you pointed out, the Netflix makes it look a lot lighter. They're in a very dark, dark cave, so without the light, you can't see anything. So that makes a lot more sense. Pei Zhu, and he like instantly wants to attack him. And I like that. Yeah, I was like, no, stay back. That's not how this is gonna work. And then we realize that, oh, he's the kid from the vision of him when he was younger. It wasn't Hua Chong. I thought it was Hua Chong, but the kid that was there with Ban Yu was him. He's like, General Hua, don't you recognize me? I've noticed with Xie Lian throughout this season that with his memory, it's hard for him to recognize certain characters. Like he had a hard time recognizing, he had a hard time recognizing Mu Qing, and he got offended by it. And here he's like, he had a hard time recognizing Ban Yu until he got close up to her. And here he's like, oh, you're the kid. So our poor Cinnamon Bun, his memory's a bit spotty. But I'm glad that we get established that he was the boy in the shadows, that we couldn't see his face. And so, but the fact that she knew him from before she even met Xie Lian means that like they're, childhood friends trope. And he's only looking at her in that flashback. Yeah, he liked her. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so Xie Lian's like, well, Ban Yu, like, was it because of him that you refused to confess? And she's like, oh. And I love that he's almost like, he's very stern in that moment. Xie Lian's like, did he force you to open the city gates? Like, he's like a parent. Xie Lian's like a parent that's like addressing his kid. Like, did he make you do this against your will? And I like that Pei Jr. is like, I didn't have to force my subordinate to do anything. Like, he calls her his subordinate. I'm wondering if that's a translation thing. But she says, no, I did it out of my choice. Like, it was my choice. I did it. And then, of course, Kamo is like this weasel. He's in collusion with Ban Yu. They massacred my people and destroyed my country. Is that true, General Pei Jr.? And I like that Hua Chong's like, well, how interesting. A perfect example of Heavenly Officials' Code of Conduct. Thank you for the lesson. I was like, Hua Chong just wants to be shady. He wants to point out and just be like, oh, wow, way to point out. He points out the Heavenly Realms' Code of Conduct. I love that he's just pointing out, wow, you massacred cities and people and killed and destroyed countries, and that got you a godly ascension. Glad to know that's how it works. It's like, oh, what shade? Like, just Hua Chong with the tea. But then Ban Yu is like, no, it was me. I made the choice. It's my fault. I honestly thought that the Windmaster and the other woman, I thought they would have been involved in all this. I was really honestly waiting for them to like show up as secret antagonists and be like, it was us all along. And that's not necessarily the case, although they've got a part in this, oddly enough. And she explains how it was her fault. And so we get to see the flashback of them as children and him helping her. And I like that he's like, did they bully you again? When we go back to the village and she's like passed out. He's like, did they bully you? And then he pulls out, like he pulls out the rag to wipe her face. And that's the rag that Xie Lian found later. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he liked her. He did. So the rag to wipe her face. And he tells her not to bully, not to let the bullies get to her, to fight back. he tells her, don't let them bully you. Just, if they come at you, then fight them back. And she's like, I don't really know if I want to do that. He's like, I'll get them out of our border one day. And she's like, but I'm half them. She's like, I'm half mixed blood of half moon. And he's like, oh, well then fight back if they bully you again. And she's like, no, I can't do that. General Hua said, and he's like, General Hua. So I like that Xie Lian, that as General Hua, as him, he was still advocating not to fight, but to be more peaceful, right? She ends up getting trampled to death in all of this. But so yeah, she's like, no, I want to listen to like what he says. And that's when we see him like coming out of the, and we don't quite see his face at all in some of these flashbacks. We don't see it completely, like not clearly, right? And so then we cut down to when he died, supposedly, and her crying over him. But he didn't really die, but she took his cape and like it's fluttering there in the breeze and she assumed that he was dead. And it's so sad to see her, like, it's so sad to see her sad about it, right? Because she was trying to follow Xie Lian's example and try to be nonviolent and do that, and it just didn't work. And so we still don't, she learned sorcery. They said she learned sorcery from someone in Yongin, but I'm like, that didn't seem like it would be Pei. Pei was a soldier. So did someone else teach her sorcery? Was it Hua Chong? Was Hua Chong, in fact, the one that was there 50 years ago that the face in the ground saw, and it wasn't Pei Jr.? That's still another question, right? Still another little question we don't have answered. But she wants to get revenge for his death. I assume that's what that look is when she looks at the cape and gets that, resolve on her face. I assume it's because she wants to like pay back those that hurt the general that she loved. Maybe. And so we cut to when she started working at the palace as the preceptor, and we cut to when they're going to conquer the Central Plain, and we see Kamo and all the soldiers, and they're getting ready to go fight them in battle. And that's when she calls them, and she's like, do we have to fight? And he says, don't worry, we have the best warriors. Just wait for our triumphant return. So she was even questioning, she did not want to fight. She's like, do we have to do this? Is there any other option? And they wouldn't give that to her. And I love how pretty she looks. She's like, ugh. She's like, I tried. And so then during this whole fight and everything, we see the two sides battling it out. And we see old Pei Jr. He looks so handsome, right? He looks so handsome with his hair down. Looks so handsome. He has his hair down all pretty. He's like, the war will be over soon. The people from both sides won't suffer anymore. I think General Hua would wish for that too. That part is interesting because he kind of thinks he, in some way, uses General Hua, uses his memory like to help her make that decision, right? So there is that he says he would want the war to end, which I agree. I think that Xie Lian would want the war to end, but I don't think Xie Lian wanted it to end with a massacre. I don't think that's just the way it ends is a little bit in contention. That part, I'm like, would Xie Lian want... I gather the feeling General Hua was all about them negotiating peacefully, not brutally killing each other, right? I think that's that's just the impression I'm getting. But in the end, we see him coming back and saying the bastards from the Central Plain. And they're talking about like setting up all these bombs. And they're like, as soon as we win this war, we're going to go attack Yongin once the city's conquered. We'll scatter out and infiltrate Yongin and let them perish with us. So yeah, she wants to just, and she overhears, right? She overhears the plan. She's like, what can we do? And he's like, there is a way. So she overhears Kamo's plan. And it's a perfect storm of bad, because she hears this plan. She's like, if I don't stop them, if we don't stop the Half Moon Pass army, they're going to get into Yongin and cause all of these deaths. And she wants to avoid all the deaths, right? She wants to avoid it. Meanwhile, Pei Jr., he wants the war to end, and he's like, well, look, you're not going to like this, but what if you open up the gates, our forces will come in and we'll wipe them out. The decision's up to you. But there's a little bit underhandedness with it, and we'll talk about that. And so she opens up the gate being like, this is the only way to stop further deaths. If we just nip this in the bud now, let them come in and destroy the army, then it'll stop. The deaths will stop. But she ends up getting killed anyway by Kamo, right? And she says, I'm sorry. She decided to open the gates. I like that Yao's like, huh. And then she just faints. I like that Huachong's the one to catch her, because he's a ghost too. A fellow ghost catches a fellow ghost. She's just worn out. Oh, and Xie Lian's little look when he looks over to her and looks up at Huachong like, are you sure? It's so cute. But Kamo tries to get out of the bonds. It doesn't work. It's pretty good for her to be able to get out of the bonds, although maybe Zhao let her out. And I like that Zhao, so Kamo is still stuck in this cycle of having died and become a ghost. He can't get over the past. And Pei Jr.'s like, look, we fought 200 years ago. You were killed. Second, why am I a weasel? He's like, no. He's like, if you didn't collude with Ban Yu, then we wouldn't have lost. And he's like, although I only had 2,000 soldiers, it was only a matter of time before I breached the gate. I didn't want to massacre your people, but you left me with no choice. And he's like, if your people didn't push us so hard, we wouldn't have wanted to take you down with us. So this whole conversation starts up, right, of whose fault it was. And again, you can relate this to other series like Attack on Titan. You can relate to other series that talk about war and whose fault is whose. In general, we'll talk about his motivations behind getting in the city. It's more than just stopping the fight, right? But Kamo brings up the point where he's like, you all left me no choice. He's like, you pushed us. He's like, you pushed us and we had to fight you back. He's like, no. And then Zhao says, well, let's sort it out then. How many times have the Half Moon people assaulted the border, robbed caravans, killed our people, and protected the bandits? And he's like, you deserved it. You occupied our land. And so he says, you invaded. So we had to fight back because you invaded our lands. And so then Sean, I like that as they're having this argument, you see like San Long and Xie Lian like standing over Ban Yu to make sure she's okay. And they're like, the boundaries between our countries were always in dispute. How could it be your land? He's like, we decided on the borders. So I like that Pei Jr. is like, who decided you owned the land? He's like, who died made you king? Why do you get to be the one that decides all that? And so he's like, the boundaries were decided on your own. The deserts were our territory while yours were the oases. He's like, was that how you decided? So he's like, yeah, you decided whose was whose, but you didn't make it equal. So of course he's like, we have seniority. He's like, we settled down in the oasis for many generations. So it's just this back and forth, right? Between them of what belongs to who and how you determine who owns what. And so it's just this idea that both sides feel justified. They both feel justified in causing this war. They're like, each of us had a cause worth protecting. And they're like, we both think we're right, so how can anybody be wrong? And so Pei Jr. says, see, there are so many matters in this world that can't be settled by arguments. We had to fight. So this line, there are matters you cannot settle by argument. We had to fight. This is probably my favorite part of the episode is when he says that line. he's like, well, there are many arguments we couldn't just settle, so we had to fight. And I love that Xie Lian says, I agree with the former sentence. Xie Lian's like, I agree that there are some matters that can't be settled by arguing. He's like, I agree with that. You're very much right on that. And then Hua Chong's like, I agree with the latter. So, oh my God, there's such chaos, right? You have Xie Lian who's like, well, we can't argue about everything. There's going to be some things we have to compromise and get along with. And I'm a precious cinnamon bun. And Hua Chong's like, sometimes we got to fight and kill people. The chaos. It's like, it seriously is. We've talked in the Discord about this, and I've talked about this in a previous discussion, but it seriously is like if Wanji and the Yiling Patriarch had a child, that is Hua Chong, right? It has all of Lan Wangji's pining, but with all the murderous bloodlust of Wei Wuxian as the Yiling Patriarch. I'm just kind of floored by it. And so he's like, you didn't kill us for your country. Oh, Kimo saying you didn't kill us for your country, which is kind of true. It is kind of true. I don't think he killed them for Young, and I don't think that that's really what General Pei Jr. cared about. He cared about Ban Yu, and he cared about the whole idea of promoting and getting past his shadow, being in the shadow of his ancestor, because he just kind of glares at him. He's like, as a descendant of exiles, you desperately needed to win the battle to work your way up to the top. And then Xie Lian's like, I was thinking about porridge and have blocked that memory out. What is a descendant of exiles? And Hua Chong's like, oh, you sweet cinnamon bun. He's like, don't you know anything about your own kind? He's like, isn't he a descendant of General Pei? And he's like, he's not a direct descendant, but the collateral descendant. If he hadn't ascended to heaven, he wouldn't have had the benefits of being his descendant. So it's like, yeah, he is like distantly related, but like if he hadn't ascended, it wouldn't have mattered. He wouldn't have been well known. He would have just been in exile. He's like, you're the kind of guy that Ban Yu betrayed us for a dirtbag like you. He's like, she was my subordinate working undercover in the Half Moon Kingdom. She has Yang in blood. Of course she'd be loyal to us. I'm like, ooh, there's more to it than that, though, I think. I think that's a good reason. I mean, sure, she may have been thinking that, but I'm like, I think there's more to it on his side of things. And he's like, as for killing you insatiable Half Moon people, I don't regret it at all. What a way to put it. And that's when the ladies are like, oh, you don't regret killing them. Okay. So, yeah. Our boy is hashtag no regrets. Get that written right on there. Old Pei Jr. Hashtag no regrets. Right as the Wind Master shows up. So this deity, all these years, you've never regretted killing those innocent passerbys either. Oh, interesting. So, yeah, she's suggesting, because he did kill innocents, right? That is very fascinating, because he's a god, but he's killed these innocent people for the sake of a ghost. I'm like, interesting. The line between gods and ghosts in this story is very gray. Very gray, and it's kind of like based on who you know. Are you in good with the Emperor? I guess you're a god. If you're not in good with the Emperor, I guess you're a ghost. And how people perceive them depends on that ranking and status. It's such a great commentary, and it kind of ties back to what MXTX has done with Modao Zushi, the idea of just the perception that people have on you. It can change very drastically and can vary so much that it kind of determines how you're viewed by others. And so it's like, who is that? And then we have, from the OP everything, the Windmaster popping in with her spirally of air, taking him out and bringing him back, being like, we heard everything what's been going on. So, oh, I like that he catches Ban Yu. And then they're in full garb. So I like that she's gone from being in, oh, poor Nanfeng. He's just like wore out. Couldn't handle the power of these two goddesses. Interesting. So then we see the little tassel in the air. Hello, Your Highness. And wow, these ladies, let me tell you, they could not look one, more like girlfriends, and two, more opposite. It's like Pinkie Pie and like the dark little pony, like from My Little Pony. Like they could not look more opposite. Interesting. I like this outfit more than the mint green owl robes, which is interesting. So the Windmaster, fun times. She's interesting so far. And the woman in black, we don't know for sure which master she is, but she looks over to Hua Chong and he's like, oh, and that look, what is that look? Why does he give that look? That very perceptive glance to her. Like she looks over at him like, oh, you're here too? And he's like, So do they have history? I'm curious. So maybe he has history with one of the masters. They know each other, but they're not saying a word, which is curious. I'm very curious. I wonder if she's one of the ones he took the powers away from. He's just like, he looks kind of murderous there, and I'm like, oh, and he's like, oh, hello, my fellow priests. Like, Xie Lian's like, hello. And poor Nan Fong just looks worse for wear. And then Zhao kneels down to the Windmaster, and Xie Lian's like, oh, hey, she's the Windmaster? Wow, why didn't you tell me, Nan Fong? And he's like, I didn't know. She used to. Oh, never mind. Okay, interesting. I wonder if, because we talked about in the episode, which episode was it that Ling Wen, that she, or Wing, oh, you all know Ling Wen, that the guys down at the temple said that it was a guy, and Xie Lian's like, oh, Ling Wen's a woman. So did the Windmaster used to be a guy and is now a girl? Can their genders swap? Maybe. I guess because they did the thing with Ling Wen where they thought it was a guy and said it was a man. Interesting. Okay. I'm assuming we'll find out in the novel, or that's going to be... Don't spoil me, because the fact that he trailed off with little ellipses means we're going to find out eventually, so I don't want to know yet. So don't tell me. We'll figure it out as we go. And she says, was it you who lured the passerby into the Half Moon Pass for the last 200 years? She's like, the restless spirits here are evidence of the bloody crime you committed. You didn't want to inhibit your promotion. You didn't want them to inhibit your promotion, so you tried to appease their anger by feeding them living souls. At any rate, this is a big deal. Yeah, that's like, about that. So she's like, you've been feeding living souls to appease the army and draw suspicion away from you. Yeah, that's a pretty big deal. She's like, you didn't want your promotion to godhood to be, hindered, or you to get demoted, so you've been hiding it for the last 200 years so that we wouldn't come down and investigate. Interesting. And she's like, and Xie Lian's like, why didn't you just get rid of the spirits? And Hua Chong's like, he couldn't. The heaven realm was watching closely, and so things had to be done in secret. He's like, see, your little precious heavenly realm, he couldn't do that because otherwise they'd find out. If he, killed all the spirits. He had to send Zhao, his alter ego. And she's like, you let snakes sting people and to lure them and feed them to the spirits. You went too far. I like that she reminds me of Xie Lian a little bit. She has that kind of like whimsical sternness to her. I'm going to call it. It's not being naive and it's not being oblivious, but it's kind of like a whimsical, like, how could you feed living souls to these army members for the last 200 years? You went too far. She sounds very motherly, basically. And he's like, I know. She's like, good, I'm glad you know. She's like, reflect on your actions. Let's go back. Again, if it had been a ghost, they would have exorcised it, right? That's kind of the amazing thing about all this, is that she's like, let's go back. That's there's a little bit of a hypocrisy there, and I'm wondering if San Long is going to talk about it or call it out. It seems like he was calling it out a little bit when we first met him on the cart. But yeah, with Shan-Ji, she killed all those women, for these reasons, for kind of selfish reasons. She wanted to get Ming Senior's attention, so she killed all these brides to try to get him to come down and see her, which was a selfish reason to do so. It was bad. And they punished her as a ghost by sealing her in a mountain. Pei Jr. kills hundreds of people by feeding their living souls to these undead soldiers, but he's doing it to kind of cover his ass so that they don't send people down to discover his bloody calamity. It's like, that's kind of bad too, but here they just go, now don't do that again. Reflect on your actions. We're going to go back and you're going to get a stern talking to. I'm like, that's a very, very different punishment than Shang-Chi got. So it's curious that that happened. And she's like, Your Highness, I'm terribly sorry that the sandstorm hit you. It was started by me. And Xie Lian's like, you did that? She's like, yeah. And he's like, again, I love that panel of all of them together. It's so wonderful. It's great. And he's like, oh, that was you? And she's like, yeah, I was trying to keep you from the Half Moon Kingdom, but you got there anyway. So she was trying to investigate things too. Interesting. And so that's curious. She was investigating on her own. Okay. So she was investigating. And that ties back to the other master being like, why don't you get your own people to help you? Why do you need my help? And she's like, I don't want to get them involved, because now we know she was kind of behind the scenes trying to figure out what the deal was. Which makes sense, because when Xie Lian went back in the communication array and was asking everybody about Half Moon Pass, the Windmaster kept handing out all the extra money, but clearly heard what Xie Lian was saying. So the Windmaster was like, oh, I'm going to go down and investigate this too. This sounds kind of interesting, but I'm going to distract all these other people. I don't want them to follow. I'm like, oh my God, it's great. Mm-hmm. And he's like, oh, and he looks back to Banyu and he's like, heavenly officials have complex relationships. Yeah, a bit. we're getting a taste of that. If the Windmaster takes Banyu up there, someone might pull a string and make her the scapegoat. I'm glad he realizes that and he vocalizes that. He's like, yeah, no, it would be far too easy once Pei Jr. and them get her up there for them to say, oh, it's all her fault, like what Yao was doing, and then just be like, no, and then that's it. And then them blame it on her. And I love that look he gives. Just, it's such a sincere look that he has on his face where he's like, no, I'm not going to let that happen. She deserves better. And I like that he stands in front of her body and like puts his foot down. He's like, I don't think that I can back off now. And it's like, and she's like, oh, rest assured, Your Highness. We heard everything from up here. We're not going to take her. The Imperial, although she's a wrath ghost, she didn't hurt anybody. So she's locked up. She did lock up the Half Moon soldiers, and set the merchants free. So, and he's like, oh, she set Tian Sheng free? And she's like, yeah, we're only going to take Kamo and General Pei Jr. with us. Interesting. Mm-hmm. Okay, now at this point, I'm trying to figure out when Yao leaves, right? The upper court is somewhat corrupted. So we do get a little bit there where she at least understands that the upper court is somewhat corrupted. Like, she says it so nicely. She's like, they're kind of jerks and shady, but I understand your worries. And then the one girl's like, are we done? Can we go now? And she was like, oh, what's the rush? I just want to take my time. I like she has a little Swiffer stick. And then this woman's like having none of it. Yeah, these two seem like the women equivalent of Hua Chong and Xie Lian. They seem like the female equivalents of them, which is fun. And then she's like, I'm going to excuse myself. See you at the upper court. Mm-hmm. And he's like, okay, goodbye. He's like, have fun. All right, let's go. And so then Zhao goes, all right. Interesting. And they go to take Kamo. I love how pretty she looks with the wind and everything using the fan. It's so pretty. Mm-hmm. And that's that. There they go. Away with the wind. And so we cut to Pei Jr., to his backstory here. And the people are saying, we're in exile. We have nothing. And we see the Half Moon soldiers. My child young, let us go. And so then I'm assuming that maybe that spurned at the Half Moon Soldiers, like maybe killed his mom or left him orphaned. And so he didn't have a good view of them to begin with. And then he runs across Banyu. He's like, why aren't you fighting back? The Half Moon people went too far. And just him hugging her, I'm like, nah, he liked her. Mm-hmm. And even him like coming up to her. Yeah. And trying to find a way to help her. So he joins the army. Yep. To try to get revenge on the Half Moon people. So the thing about this is that because he's in exile, he can't get promoted, right? His exile, I'm going to switch back to my purple marker there. His exile, our poor boy Pei Jr., his exile limits the ability for him to be promoted. So he thought, well, what if I do this big grand thing and massacre and just end all of this, and then maybe that will lead to my promotion, right? He's like, I'll assign your positions now. So he's like, you're in exile, and so you're lagging behind your peers, and you have to work harder. And you can just see like the twinkle in his eyes, like the twinkle in Pei Jr.'s eyes, where he's made to work harder. And so he does. He slaughters all these people, and he saves his fellow soldiers. They fought a battle, and they're like, Peiju has the most kills. Surely he'll be promoted. And he has all of their attention, but it's not going to matter because he's in exile. They won't promote him. I'll be your deputy lieutenant. Yep. He doesn't get the promotion. It's like with his father being an official, he'll surely work his way up. On the contrary, you're doomed with your background unless you get lucky and win an epic battle. That's just, they're like, yeah, just because you're related to him means nothing. That unless you do some grand feat, it's not going to matter. And so, yeah, he has this like internal conflict, right? It seems. And then he decides to help Banyu. And by using her, he's like, they keep on going. They keep on getting victories after victories. And the one guy seems like he's jealous that there's a possibility that Pei Jr. could overtake him, right? And so then when she asks, are we doing the right thing? He's like, with your help, the war's going to be over soon. So it's kind of, but it is a very self-serving, that's the thing that's kind of messed up, is that he does kind of use Banyu a little bit. He's like, with your help, I can end this war. I can win this big epic battle, and then no one has to die anymore, right? But it's kind of, he's self-serving too. He kind of uses her. He's like, I think General Hua would wish for that too. I'm like, I don't think he'd wish for you to massacre an entire city. Don't think that was his point. I think she kind of made that clear about that whole nonviolence thing he was kind of all about. It got him killed, but this guy tells him, I love that the deputy lieutenant, he's like, we've got this whole set, this final battle. We'll conquer the Half Moon Kingdom and pay back this insult. But he's so jealous that he's just like, your service will be rewarded if you win with only 2,000 troops. And if not, you're going to pay and be punished. It's like, it's so unreasonable, right? What he asks is so unreasonable. And Pei Jr. knows it. So he knows that the odds are stacked against him. And so he kind of uses Banyu to win the fight because he's like, he knows how at odds they are. And she's like, what can we do if the city is destroyed? The Half Moon people will bomb Yongin for revenge. There'll be countless deaths and casualties. So he does what he thinks is right. He convinces her to open the gates, knowing that it'll give them the advantage and they can win the war. But also what was on the line was a lot of things for him. So it's interesting, that decision. And I feel like she didn't know the full extent of why he was doing it, right? Because she didn't know about his ascension either. But then we find out after the battle's over, he's like, he's looking for her. He he does this to get that position, but also to end the conflict. And so he's looking for her during the battle, and you can hear them say, kill her first. And they're just talking about her being a traitor. And then he sees the sinner's pit, right? Kill the traitor. He sees the sinner's pit and climbs to the top of it, right? And it's so sad seeing him like look around for her, trying to find her to like get her and go away. And then when he goes up to the top of the sinner's pit. Oh. And seeing our poor, I do feel bad for him in that moment when he goes up to find her. Oh. I'm going to take a picture of it. Oh, but I feel so bad for him that he sees that she was killed and strung up. And Kamo said he'd keep stringing her up over and over again. And he couldn't save her. So it's like he gets the ascension, but at what cost? Damn. Yep. And so then we cut back to the present at the sinner's pit, and Xie Lian sees the little cloth, the cloth that he used to wipe her face, in the dust. And Xie Lian's like, I don't quite understand. What is this situation? The situation is he liked Ban Yu. That's the situation. It's like, I don't get it. And so then we have to report the crime to the emperor. You've done your part. You should stay out of this. And Xie Lian's like, you know I'm not going to do that. Is it because of General Pei? And he's like, yes, you've certainly offended him. And he's like, no, I already knew I'd offend one of the generals. So that's interesting. So Xie Lian, he's like, I was going to offend a Pei one of the way or the other. So here we are. I was going to offend at least one of the two generals. Doesn't matter which one it is. So then Nanfeng is there, but Yao's already pieced back out of the heavenly realm. Now Yao has no interest in staying in the mortal realm at all. He wants to piece out to the heavenly realm as quickly as possible. So we find out from either from Nanfeng or Huachong, General Pei appreciates Pei Zhu and wants him to replace the Western martial god Yi Jin. Oh, okay. So, interesting. Yi Jin, I want to write this down on my little handy dandy chart because I feel like that's going to be something that we need to know. That General Pei wants Pei Jr. to replace the Western martial god Yi Jin. Okay, interesting. So there's a little bit of politics going on here. All right. I wonder if Pei Zhu will be demoted when he gets back. If he does, you'll get into trouble. Yeah, so I mean the idea is, yeah, because the Windmaster's taking him back now, he could get in trouble with the Emperor for causing all this. And Nanfeng is like, if he gets in trouble, they're going to blame it on you because you ratted him out in this situation. So if he gets in trouble and General Pei gets pissed because now he's not going to get promoted to the Western martial god, that's going to be on you. And Xie Lian's like, and then Huachong's like, don't worry. Pei Ming is a proud guy and he won't use deceitful ways. I don't know if he's being sincere with that or if he's being facetious. And so then, yeah, Xie Lian's like, where's Yao gone? They're like, well, he must be ashamed of his wrongful deduction about the culprit, so he's gone back himself. And I like that Nanfeng's like, what happened when I wasn't around? And Xie Lian's like, it's a long story. Yeah, that's not gonna work. But, we could take Ban Yu with us and head back and save the others. And that's when he remembers that she's over there. Oh, bless his heart. And she's still knocked out. And he's like, we can use your collection magic. So, yeah. So, again, I forget in Chinese mythology, in these stories, in these fantasy stories of Dan Mai, that not only do you have TARDIS sleeves that can contain anything, like a whole house in there, but also you have, like, collection items that can take... It makes sense. Oh my God. I want to see a picture of San Long and San Long and Xie Lian as Ghostbusters now. Can we make that happen? And putting Ban Yu in the cup. So basically what you're telling us is that he's a Ghostbuster. And he has a jar that he can put ghosts in. I'm 100% for this. I'm all about this. This is wonderful. I love this. I'm okay with this. Sure, go for it. He's like, why, thank you, San Long. Thank you for this ghost busting jar. That's so nice of you. Oh my God. It's great. And yet puts her inside of it. That way he doesn't have to carry an actual person for miles and miles, since we now know that they're all gods and ghosts, right? Yep. And then he puts them in the TARDIS sleeve. Ready to go. Yep. And then the sun's starting to come up. And so then they go and save the old grandpa with the fern. Yep. And so as they're gathering up all of their merchant's gear and all their stuff, I like that Shang comes up to him and he's like, priest, I have a question. Yeah, I love how innocent he looks. He's so sweet and innocent. He's like blinking his eyes very innocently. He's like, you're a god. I saw you use your spiritual powers. And Xie Lian's like, wow, am I that conspicuous? He's like, I'll keep it between us. If it weren't for you, I would have been cast into the pit. I'll build a temple and dedicate it to you. Aww. And I love Xie Lian's little blush. He's like, oh, well, thanks. He's like, thank you very much. That's really nice of you. Aww. I love, Shang is so cute. It's so sweet. And Nanfeng's like, wow, okay. We've got kids building shrines for us. Good deal. Xie Lian looks so pleased. And so they all go on their way. And so, does that mean she'll report the matter? Won't she offend General Pei? So yeah, so Xie Lian's like, now wait a minute. He's like, you said I'd get in trouble for reporting this matter, but won't the Windmaster get in trouble? And Nanfeng's like, yeah, no, she's pretty much powerful enough that General Pei isn't going to mess with her. I'm like, interesting. She's younger, but she's doing way better than you. Oh, so the Windmaster, we're going to say that she is strong. Strong enough that General Pei isn't going to mess with her. And she's just, you know, proving she's up. She's, one-upping old Xie Lian there, right? But Xie Lian doesn't seem too concerned. And Hua Chong says with someone supporting her, of course she's doing well. Yeah, he's like, well, of course she's doing well. She has people supporting her. Duh, that's how you gods get your power. So of course she's fine. And he's like, Xie Lian's like, are you referring to the lady in black next to her? Oh, so basically San Long's like, yeah, no, the lady in black supporting her. So that's obviously helping her. So saying that she's supporting the Windmaster. Okay. Curious. And so then Xie Lian doesn't know. He's like, oh no. He says no, but the woman in black is powerful too. Okay, so San Long is saying the Windmaster is getting support. We can assume as the audience it's either he's talking about from the people that are worshiping her or from another outside source. San Long's being pretty mysterious about this. But he does say the woman in black is powerful too. That she's one of the 5 masters of wind, water, rain, earth, and thunder. That's so weird. The 5 masters. And they're all kind of elements that are similar. Like, you know, wind and earth and rain. Wind, earth, and water I can understand. But rain and water are similar. And then thunder kind of goes with that. So that's curious. I wonder if she is maybe the earth or thunder. It seems odd. I don't know. Or water. My first inclination was that she's the water master, but I don't know. That's interesting as one of the 5 masters. Okay. Don't make an enemy of her. He's like giving Xie Lian and be like, don't mess with her. She's bad news. Interesting. He's like, oh, I agree. Like, shit, it's fine. So thanks, everybody. I'm like, you just dropped that casual exposition bomb of like, there's 5 masters. We don't mess with them. We've met the Windmaster. The black woman in black is one of them. Won't say which one because we want to be mysterious, but don't mess with them. And Xie Lian's like, good to know. Thanks, everybody. Want to stay for dinner? It's like, and then Nanfeng's like, did you just, what okay. And he's like, as a token of my gratitude. And Nanfeng's like, a token of your gratitude? Like, what are you doing? He's like, I love you guys. Hello? Yes, you need me? What's that? There's a tunnel? Okay, I'll be right there. That is the most convenient out And it's absolutely hilarious of any of these characters. I'm like, are you freaking serious? He's like, oh, something's happened in the palace. I have to go back right now. He's like, and then he just zooms away. Oh my God. Xie Lian's like, is my cooking really that bad? I guess it's just us then. Uh-huh. And I like that it's like, okay, you two are all alone now. He's like, what do you want to eat? Hua Chong. Mm-hmm. And that smile when he's like, oh, you know. Oh, is that it? Mm-hmm. And when he said, what would you like to eat? I thought he was going to be like, you. I thought he was going to be like, you. You know? I was waiting for it. I was waiting for him to say that. But censors, I'm going to be very curious to see this, to read this in the novel. I'll say that. Because he leans in ever so closely. And Xie Lian's like, hello? And he's like, I prefer that you call me San Long. Oh my gosh. Oh man, I've talked for an hour. Of course. But yeah, no, this was a great episode. Oh my God. This was really good. But just such a weird, I mean, I guess with the whole, like, I prefer you call me San Long, that is a nice way to conclude it, but it just doesn't feel like an ending. It doesn't feel like the ending of a donghua, the ending of a season. It doesn't feel like the ending of it. I feel like there's more that needs to be said. So I'm going to be curious to see what the OVA entails and then to read volume 1 and see where volume 1 actually ends. Maybe the OVA will end where volume 1 ends. Curious. So yeah, so my plans next week are to watch the advertisements. There's 2 videos of it that Anime Annie has made for me, and then to watch the OVA, and then we'll react to the OP, the ED, and the 2 EDs and the lyrics for those. So yay! But man, I'm glad we finally got some answers and backstory. Lots of surprises, lots of fun things, lots of flirty romantic moments. Just what I want for my Heaven Official's blessing. Couldn't ask for more. So, but I'm curious to know your thoughts down below. Please no spoilers, especially novel spoilers. But we'll be looking at the OVA next week, and I'm really excited. So, in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and I'll be back next week with more of Heaven Official's blessing. Bye.